Outside the Book continues from the 2012 SOKY Bookfest, the Southern Kentucky Festival of Books. I'm Barbara Deeben, delighted to have with me, as always, Silas House. This is a man who I learned about many years ago now when they told me there's this guy, he's a really good writer, he's a mailman and he writes on his mail route back in Lilly, Kentucky,
Right.
and that's how it all began. You knew you always had it in you.
Yeah, pretty much wrote my first novel on the mail route, and I would think about it all day long while I was out there on the mail route by myself. And then when I would get home and get a chance to sit down, I would write down what I had thought that day, and slowly a novel came together out of that.
And that novel was
Clay's Quilt. It
Clay's
came out in
Quilt.
2001.
Your
Yeah.
very first novel.
Yep.
Since then, you've written several more. Your most recent one, the current one, Same Sun Here?
Same son here.
Okay, talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's a novel that's being promoted for young adult readers, 10 years old and up. I wrote it for everybody. Adults seem to like it as much as 10-year-olds, maybe more. Um, it's about a 12-year-old basketball star living in eastern Kentucky who becomes pen pals with a 12-year-old Indian immigrant girl living in New York City. And they sort of are forced to write to each other, by their teachers. And they come to realize they start out thinking they're going to be so different. He's from Kentucky, she's from India. But they realize how similar their cultures are. They realize how similar they are. And they sort of become better people by knowing each other. And it's all about how once we get to know each other, we're a lot more alike than we might think that we are. It's about the lost art of letter writing. It's about standing up for what you believe in despite a personal loss, So it was really interesting to write a novel with another author. But it was easy because we were writing letters to each other. So we decided we would just write letters to each other and we wouldn't talk about the novel and we would just let the plot arise organically. And so it's just a novel of reaction. Neela wrote me a letter as Mina, her character, and then I would respond as River. And we just wrote back and forth over the course of one school year. And the plot arose on its own, and it's just a really sweet book, and I'm really proud of it.
And a unique experience. Same Sun Here is what it's called. I've interviewed you over the years, and I often quote you about just how your characters will often come to you without you. This voice speaks through you. How critical is that to the books that you write?
How critical is it to the book? I think that's everything, without a strong character, the story doesn't matter. Nothing matters if your character's no good. When you think about your favorite books, like To Kill a Mockingbird, how can you think about that book and not think about Scout and Jim and Atticus and Calpurnia and Boo Radley? It's all about the characters. That's what speaks to us. That's what we care about, are the people. Or the characters. If you're talking about Ode Yeller, the dog is a character that we care deeply for, and that's why we love that book. So it's everything.
It's everything. Speaking of everything, this man has done just about everything. I've traced your career. You've written a play, you've written now a short story, and I want to talk a little bit about that short story. It's called The Recruiter, and I had the distinct pleasure of visiting Larkspur Press, where Gray Zeitz printed that book, just hand printed. It's beautiful, and it's a lovely story, Recruiter. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Sue Masick is a banjo player and a singer that lives in Washington County, Kentucky. She's a member of the Real World String Band, but she also does a lot of her own songwriting. She has a solo album, and on that solo album, she has a song called Brennan's Ballad, which is all about a woman who goes off to fight in Iraq, and she's injured, and they put her in the Walter Reed Army Hospital, and the Walter Reed Army Hospital was condemned because it was overrun with roaches and rats and mold. And, we were putting our veterans in there, our injured veterans in there. So we talk this big talk in America about how much we care about our troops, and then we put them in a hospital like that, you know. So it's just unbelievable. So I love that song so much. I wanted to expand on it. So I wrote a short story based on it. So I owe that whole book and short story to Sue Massick.
Sue Massick, the recruiter, Silas House, it's always a pleasure to have you. What's ahead in the next year?
I'm working on a new novel about a man who kidnaps his own child and runs off to Key West. So it's my first book to be completely set outside the region.
There you go, to be determined. Thank you, as always.
Thank you.
We've been talking with Silas House from the 2012 Southern Kentucky Festival of Books for Outside the Book. I'm Barbara Deeb.